Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. Thanks for joining us. You know the drill. Subscribe if you haven't, like if you do, leave me a comment below, and hit that little bell for notifications of when we go live or put up new content. Now, as you may notice, I'm a little more casual than I am normally when I do a show, but it is, well, officially Sunday, August 10th. And this is recording for a show on Monday. But I'll be in a homicide trial, at least through middle of the week. It's probably one of the simplest homicide trials that I've ever done in my 30 years of practicing law. And, we should be able to get through it pretty darn quick. But what I wanted to talk to you today about is Bryan Kohberger. All right. We're receiving more and more information as it relates to his cell phone. All right. Now, apparently there's not a smoking gun. And when you put all the pieces together, obviously the attorneys and Bryan Kohberger thought that it was not going to be a good day, which is why he more than likely pled guilty, and the fact that he was guilty as well. So let's open the record for officially August 10th, but we're going to be airing this August 11th. So let's get to it. All right. So let's go ahead and get to today's docket. So back in July of this year, Bryan Kohberger pled guilty to the murders of the 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. Now, this was all just prior to the start of his scheduled trial. He received a sentence of life imprisonment without parole, 1 for each victim, plus an additional 10 years. And all this related back to when the 4 victims were discovered stabbed to death back on November 13th of 2022 in their off-campus residence there in Moscow, Idaho. Now, the digital forensic analysis conducted by experts from Cellebrite have revealed evidence of premeditation through Kohberger's electronic devices, which was intended to be presented at trial. So let's take a look at the first issue that they came up with. One was the phone activity and the blackout. So analysis of Kohberger's mobile phone showed a deliberate deactivation at 2:54 a.m. on November 13th of 2022. Coincidentally, coinciding with the time frames prosecutors identified the time when the murders took place. Now, Wi-Fi and cellular data were disabled, preventing location tracking and background operation. Now, the device reactivated at approximately 4:48 a.m. Now, forensic experts Heather Barnhart and Jared Barnhart from Cellebrite noted that this was one of only 4 instances of complete inactivity since June of 2022, indicating an intentional action rather than an accidental signal loss or battery depletion. So does this show premeditation? Well, Kohberger, a criminology PhD student there at Washington State, exhibited behaviors extending beyond academic interest. So forensic recovery uncovered repeated downloads of detailed case files on serial killers, including Danny Rolling, who targeted college students with a knife. These were not superficial searches, but comprehensive PDF documents accessed multiple times. Additionally, Kohberger routed internet traffic through NordVPN in the days surrounding the murders to obscure his online activity, and he disabled Wi-Fi on his device. Now, recovered data also included searches related to the Idaho murders and information on the victims stored in concealed file directories. So, attempts at concealment and residual traces despite efforts to erase the evidence, such as using private browsing and scrubbing files, forensic tools revealed incomplete cleanup. They're never perfect. For instance, passive Wi-Fi logs indicate prior connections to the network of the Mad Greek, a restaurant where victims Madison Mogen and Xana Kernodle both worked. Now, this suggests possible previous encounters, aligning with reports from a coworker who recalled seeing Kohberger at the restaurant. Now, the experts recreated the digital environment to analyze call logs and data gaps, confirming that full concealment required specific steps like disabling connectivity before powering off. And these are all actions that he took. So what did Kohberger's attempts to wipe and conceal? Well, phone data absence of a single smoking gun in digital evidence, right? Not there. So the digital forensic examination did not yield a single irrefutable piece of evidence, often referred to as, the smoking gun, that independently proved Kohberger's guilt. Instead, the case against him relied on a mosaic of subtle, interconnected data points that collectively demonstrated premeditation and intent. For instance, the experts analyzed fractured call logs, unexplained data gaps, and behavioral anomalies in device usage, such as the 4 rare periods of complete phone inactivity since June of 2022, one of which aligned precisely with the murder timeline. Now, these elements required cross-referencing baseline patterns of Kohberger's normal digital behavior, such as routine communications and browsing habits, to highlight these deviations. Now, as Jared Barnhart noted and was going to testify, and this was an interview that he gave to the Idaho Statesman, says that the cumulative approach revealed a story of preparation rather than a standalone revelation. So unlike the DNA evidence from the knife sheath, which directly linked Kohberger to the scene, the digital trail provided contextual support for intent, underscoring the methodical nature of the crime without offering a definitive isolated breakthrough. So what do we do know? We know Kohberger made deliberate efforts to sanitize his mobile device, complicating the forensic recovery process and suggesting an awareness of digital tracking methods. Analysis revealed that he employed multiple concealment techniques, including routing internet traffic through NordVPN to make him anonymous, make these searches anonymous as well, enabling private browsing modes, and scrubbing files from visible directories. Now, court records indicate that some data, potentially including location history or additional searches related to the victims, was likely permanently deleted during the interval between the murders of November 13th in 2022 and his arrest date on December 30th of 2022. Now, the experts recreated the device's environment to identify these voids, noting that Kohberger's actions, such as disabling Wi-Fi and cellular data before powering off the phone, were not accidental, but part of a broader cleanup strategy. Despite these measures, forensic tools uncovered residual traces in buried file systems, including downloaded case files on serial killers and post-murder searches. Heather Barnett emphasized that while Kohberger made their job really hard by attempting a thorough wipe, incomplete execution left enough fragments to reconstruct key activities, illustrating the limitations of manual data erasure against advanced recovery methods. So, digital logs from Kohberger's phone provided evidence of a potential prior connection to at least 2 of the victims through their workplace. Now, the Mad Greek restaurant in Moscow, Idaho, where Madison Mogen and Zaynat Konodal were employed as servers, well, they have a passive Wi-Fi connection records that show Kohberger's device had previously joined or sought the restaurant's network, suggesting he had visited the location on 1 or more occasions before the murders. Now, this was not an active connection during the crime, but a historical log embedded in the device's system files, which survived attempts at data concealment. Now, reports from a coworker corroborated this, recalling that Kohberger was dining there twice and ordered a vegan pizza, though no direct interaction with the victim was confirmed. Now, forensic experts highlighted this as a subtle but significant link as it deviated from Kohberger's otherwise isolated digital footprint and raised questions about reconnaissance or familiarity with the victim's routines. Now, while not establishing motive, this evidence contributed to the overall pattern of premeditation, indicating that Kohberger may have encountered the environment associated with Mogen and Konodal prior to the events of November 13th. Now, Kohberger's digital records showed limited social interaction, primarily with his parents and sister. And following the murders, starting at 6:13 a.m. on November 13th of 2022, he engaged in frequent calls and texts with his parents and sister, a pattern consistent with his baseline behavior. On December 29th of 2022, the day before his arrest, he intended these communications and searched terms such as paranoid, psychopath, and wiretapping. Now, post-arrest reports from fellow inmates described obsessive hygiene routines and Kohberger maintaining regular phone contact with his mother while in custody. His family attended the sentencing where he declined to speak. And now, while the DNA from the knife sheath at the scene linked Kohberger to the crime, the digital forensic provided context on intent rather than a definitive motive. Now, the experts established a pattern of normal device usage that deviated significantly around the murders, supporting premeditation over impulsivity. And no clear explanation for the crimes emerged, but the evidence illustrated methodical planning and execution. Now, these elaborations are based on forensic findings from the Celebrite experts, Heather Barnett and Jared Barnhart, as well as unsealed court documents and related reports. Now, they obviously emphasize the absence of a singular, decisive piece of evidence, but it shows Kohberger's efforts to erase digital traces and indications of prior connections to the victims via this device activities. So, although the forensic examination did not yield a single irrefutable piece of evidence, often referred to as that smoking gun, well, the case was going to rely upon it as well. Although there wasn't, like a confession or something in Kohberger's phone, the fact that he attempted to erase it shortly after the murders is obviously evidence of consciousness of guilt. Now, I have told you many, many times, and I'll take my phone out of my back pocket here. This phone, okay? This is the greatest thing ever created for law enforcement, all right? They have access, they being the police, have so much access to digital evidence that bears witness against just about every defendant. Now, I'm certainly not saying if you're going to commit a crime, you shouldn't take your phone. But if Bryan Kohberger had truly been thinking, he should have said, I'm going to leave my phone at home so that basically he could have established an alibi. But no, everybody thinks they have to take their phone. Probably should have got a car that, was a little less conspicuous or obvious as well. But, the criminal cannot think of everything while they're planning it. Even though they think they have, there's always going to be something that they forget. And in Bryan Kohberger's case, it was obviously the DNA and his knife sheath on his K-bar sheath that he left behind. It's never a perfect crime. But if you think about it, you got to have respect for the old-time detectives before all of the video evidence that is available. Phone pinging, email, text messages, all those things that we have today. You got to give some respect to the old-time detectives who had to do it the old-fashioned way and not just say, let's get the guy, let's search his phone, and then let's see what we can find incriminating on there. Something to think about, ladies and gentlemen. Now, obviously, like I said, there's no smoking gun on the phone of Kohberger, but there's just too many coincidences that relate to turning it off before the murders, turning it on again after the murders, and then obviously the consciousness of guilt of erasing everything on the phone as well, or attempts to erase lots of things on the phone. And just like they said at the sentencing, Bryan Kohberger is not as smart as he thinks he is. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we got for today. I know it's a short, abbreviated show, but I wanted to bring this to you. Like I said, I'll be in a homicide trial because that's right. How many of your YouTube lawyers out there actually walk the walk and talk the talk and actually go do homicide trials? This guy. That's right. Remember that when you're trying to think of who should I go through for unbiased answers to questions that you may want answered. That's right. Come to CrimeTalk with Scott Reich. All right. Thanks for watching. That's all we have. Remember, the Constitution matters.